Welcome to the first virtual rating of the NSCC Akerley campus here in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. We are excited to be on site and appreciate the permission given by the college to be able to rate this building during our COVID epidemic. I wanted to give a few introductions as we get started. First of all, at all times while we're in the building, we do have to wear masks, so that will be in place. I also want you to keep in mind that as we go through the building, you're going to see things that are a bit unusual to the normal circumstances at the college. Because the video is for the purpose of rating the building, normally we consider on site a snapshot in time and we rate from that information. I'm going to ask that we give a little bit of grace to the situation today and notice that when there are cleaning carts in place or pylons in place, we are going to imagine for the sake of our rating they are not there. Having been on this site many times before, I can assure you those things are normally not in the way as you are maneuvering through the building. Also keep in mind that as we proceed through the route and follow the path of travel, we will be looking for lots of things that I will not be speaking to. I want you to be taking observations and making notes and following your handbook. I have my digital professional handbook with me. I also have my CSA B651-18, as well as a measuring tape and a door gauge and lots of places with a rating survey to take notes. I hope that you enjoy this tour and thank you for joining us here at the college. Here we are at our designated accessible parking spaces here at the NSCC campus. You'll notice there are 2 accessible parking spaces here. It's important to note that there are also 6 more at the back of the campus, and that makes a total of 8 accessible spaces. You'll need that for the first question and first feature on your rating, which is the number of designated accessible parking spaces. There are 654 total spaces on site, but for the purpose of rating, we're going to focus on these 2 today. When we use our professional handbook, looking at feature 1.1.1, we're first of all rating for number of designated accessible spaces. So you will need that information to rate accordingly. Second, we're looking at location of designated spaces. When we look at that, we're thinking about visitors, users, and usage. And of course, during COVID, it will not give us an accurate example of what is on site and who's present. But having been here before, I can tell you that there is usually at least 1 space available at the front, and the ones at the back also do have some availability. We can talk about that further later. So when we come to our parking spaces and we start rating for the designated dimensions, we want to measure both the access aisles and the spaces themselves. That's information we're going to use. Measuring the access aisles separately from the designated spaces. All measurements will be provided in a handout, so they're not recorded here. Once you have your measurements, we start focusing on the signage. As you can see, there's both horizontal and vertical signage present, which means it's available for viewing whether a car is parked here or not. The vertical signage is also set off of the path of travel, which is very important for all users walking on the pathways. So now we're going to head up the curb ramp and onto the pathway in order to head to the main entrance of the building. As we're on our path of travel, leaving the area of parking and proceeding to the main entrance, we're paying attention to the pathway for both, not just the width, but also the slope and the cross slope, making sure it meets what's required. And if it was nighttime, looking for illumination, and also paying attention to the width and weather for users and usage. Two people can travel together or people can pass as they're walking. Take a measurement. So as we arrive at the main entrance of the building, there are a lot of things to observe. And anything that is observable through video, I'm not going to discuss. I want you to use your professional handbook and determine how things are to be rated. But for the things that you can't view, we're going to talk about how to measure the clear width of a door, how to measure for the buttons and the access fob for the faculty. And then we will also be looking at the drop-off area for the people arriving on site. So first, we will go over to our door, and we will note that there are stickers placed on the door. And also, as we open the door, when we measure for clear width, we are measuring from the furthest object out to the area where you enter. So as I take my measurement, remember, it is not the frame of the door, it is the last object protruding to the clear opening. Into there. Also measuring for the threshold. And noting that there are ramps present. We would measure to the button. Measuring to the button. And also to the security fob for the faculty. Also, of course, noting a gap that could be a hazard when somebody's arriving on site. We will proceed to our drop-off area as well. So here we are at our drop-off area. The first thing you'll notice is it's very close to the main entrance. That's a big win for everybody that's using the building. It also provides an excellent close proximity to the main entrance of the building, which is a win for all users. You'll notice that it has a nice, large, wide cut right to the ground for a level, smooth transition up to the pathway. We measure for distance, make sure that there are no obstacles in place, and also no illumination, which is excellent both in the daytime and the evening, since you're not here to observe in the evening. Do keep in mind, there is not seating, and we would also be rating for that. Let's head inside the building. So here at the Student Services Desk, there's a lot of things that we are looking for in our rating. First things we're going to be paying attention to are the various heights of the counters, which not only offer excellent choices for users to approach the counter spaces, but a very welcoming and well-contrasted color scheme is used. You also would have noticed as we entered this space, there's clear, well-contrasted signage that's available above us. The illumination is excellent. The windows offer a good example of window treatments for adjustable lighting. and there are options for seating present as well. It's important to notice, of course, flooring that might be a little bit more active than what we would choose in a rating, but we can certainly choose to rate that accordingly as we go. So let's take some measurements of height. We're looking at height for the counter, every counter option. And when we get to our lowered counter, not only are we measuring height, we're measuring knee clearance, so a bottom number and a top number, and we're also measuring for depth. So we want to get down and make sure that we have ample clearance for a user coming out to the furthest point for a transaction services.
We email every single. All right.
So here we are in our front lobby, and you will notice a lot of things, hopefully as you've entered the building with us, and also as we're standing here for observation. We're standing beside our campus directory, which gives us a good idea of where to go. First things we're noting, of course, is the directional signage to help us get here, the illumination being quite good, and also noticing that they have made washrooms available in the main lobby, so they're close to access as you've entered the building. And pay attention to the illumination, the signage that is overhead as we're coming in, and then also with the directory, we're looking for a lot of things specifically. We're paying attention to the surface treatment. It is a matte surface without glare, but you'll notice that there is no braille or anything tactile for me to follow. And we're going to measure for height, but you're probably noticing already it's quite high for a directory board if you wanted to view it from the seated position. Take our measurements, taking it to center line. Let's move on. So here we have arrived in pretty much the center of the first floor of the campus. We are right between the A wing and the C wing, being in the center for B wing, and this is where we find our elevator. It's also where we find our main corridor, path of travel. We can notice the illumination, that we have some directional signage. We also have some bathroom options, and we're noticing right here is our elevator. Elevator, I think their attempt was to conveniently place it in the center of the building, but because of that, we've traveled quite a distance from both the front doors or if we were entering at the back doors. Important to note for convenience and location. I will also mention that other than the signage that may have been on a directory, there is no other indication of where to find the elevator except for when you reach a very small blade signage that is hard to see even once you enter this portion of the hallway. Signage is quite lacking for this elevator, and speaking with users who have been on site at this campus, most people have a very hard time finding how to navigate to the elevator. That's important to note as we rate our elevator. So let's take some ratings and look at our elevator use. Using our call button, we will call for the elevator. Taking some time to measure the clear width of entrance, also noticing the level threshold, and as we go in, we'll take interior dimensions. So the first thing we're going to take note of in the elevator is heights, both of handrails and of the controls. We're also noting the display done in a blue LED and the directional indicator if we were choosing which direction the elevator was going. The floor surface is a light gray, some contrast to the wall, and excellent illumination is found in this location. That is the full reading for our elevator. Let's proceed now to the washrooms. So here we find ourselves at the accessible stall in the men's washroom. It's important to remember that you rate both the men's and the women's and don't assume that they are always duplicates. You will often find different variations of things as you enter. So we notice first a wide door, D handle that's easy to use, limited dexterity. Opening our door, we pay attention to the other side as well. We have an easy to slide latch. We have a second D handle conveniently placed. But unfortunately, we have a coat rack on the door. We always want these mounted on the wall or on fixed surfaces inside, and that will be noted in your rating. As we enter into the bathroom stall, there are a lot of things we're looking for in a very small space. We're paying attention to grab bars, both the height and the design of them, where the toilet paper is mounted, the height of the toilet itself, as well as which side the handle is on for flushing if it is not a sensor toilet, and very importantly, the dimensions of the bathroom stall. We want to have ample clear width that lines up with what's in our professional handbook and CSA V651 guide, as well as a turn radius that allows a person to navigate comfortably within the stall. Let's take some measurements. So as we take some measurements, we're always paying attention to the height of the toilet paper, as well as the distance from the end of the toilet to where the toilet paper is pulled down from. This can be done using an eyeball from a distance and getting an accurate measure. We have our heights for both grab bars. And while we're here, we'll take a height of the toilet. Noting where the flush is on this side. Now we're going to take clear width. Clear width is always done from the wall, the clear space, to the edge of the toilet, looking straight down. We'll also take a dimensional measurement out to here, making sure good space is given. Now that we have our measurements for our bathroom, make sure to take note of things that you need to observe, whether a call button is placed, whether there's a power outlet close to the toilet. After that, we are going to proceed over to our urinals and our sink and counters and take some measurements of that. As we rate our urinals, there's a lot of things that we're looking for. We start off, of course, paying attention to height. When there's more than one urinal, we're comparing. Do we have a variety of height selection? You'll notice that they are all the same height. To measure the height of urinal, you're going from the floor to the rim of the urinal. Next, we're paying attention to are there handbars. Normally we have grips available here. There is a privacy screen in place. Maybe some people would say it could double as a handbar, but not exactly what we're looking for. There is a sensor flush. There's also white against a darker surface, which is giving some contrast. Let's go and have a look at the sink. There are a lot of things we're looking for in a bathroom. We will be providing measurements, but be sure to use your professional handbook to look for observations that you are going to be expected to make. Things I'll point out that you might not be able to catch from a video are, first of all, how to measure the counter height. Taking floor to the height itself, but then there's a second measurement we need. We also need to have the measurement for knee clearance. Because of the lip, it's obviously a fair bit lower, so be sure to pay attention to whether it's sufficient for clearance. We also are looking at where the pipes are located, whether there's coverage and protection on them for hot water burns for people who don't have feeling in their legs. When we approach the sink, we're looking at the style of lever used, whether it can be done with limited dexterity. And the mirror is on an angled position. The height of it is only slightly raised from the counter, but as you will notice, the soap dispenser is quite out of reach for someone in a seated position. Once we're done washing our hands, we're proceeding over to a paper towel. We measure paper towel for height, but right away you're probably noticing it's a significant obstacle underneath. Convenient for somebody throwing their paper towel out, but not convenient for someone that needs to have roll-up access to a paper towel holder. Note the style of paper towel dispenser. If paper is available, it's easy to use. Once it becomes unavailable, however, it is not an easy to manipulate with limited dexterity on the side. It requires specific controls. There are many other observations you can make as you work in this bathroom, but let's go take a look at the women's washroom. In the women's bathroom, you'll notice a few variations from what we saw in the men's bathroom next door. That's common, and that's why we never assume that every bathroom is a duplicate of the other. Every washroom has to be rated, every accessible stall has to be looked at for clear width and for the details of what we're rating for. Because we did the detail next door, we're not going to do the detail here, but I do want to point out, of course, approaching the sink that has the angled mirror does have an obstacle in place. We would note that in our rating. We would also take measurements of the counter height here, and we would note any obstacles that are in the way of a paper towel dispenser. Noting path of travels, also noting heights, and making sure that we have accurate measurements for everything. Those measurements are averaged to get the accurate final score for the rating of the washroom and the specific features. Let's head over to a theater. So as we approach the theater, there's a few things we're going to notice. We're going to pay attention to the type of door, the contrast around the door, the signage. This signage being placed higher than some other signage that we'll be rating later, but remember, it's a combined score of everything to complete the feature number for the signage. So we would take a measurement of the height, we would take note of the design, and this is a good place to practice measuring the weight of a door. So as you turn it to open, noticing it's a good style handle, we're taking a door gauge and we're wrapping it around the door, and as we give consistent even pull on it, we can get a reading for the weight of the door. This one falls at 4.2 pounds, and you can rate according to the guide. Let's go inside. Well, here's our theater. As we enter, there's a few things you're going to notice right away. Number one, we have full illumination throughout the room. I'm standing on the stage. Entering at stage level means there is full access to the stage for anybody who would like to participate in this location with a presentation. Unfortunately, seating does not provide as many options. You'll notice there is no designated seating for anyone who's in a wheeled mobility device. There's also very limited access for any companions that may be present with them. And you can see there's very little, if any, option available here. Take a view around. Make sure to rate according to your professional handbook. Note that at the NSCC campus for our rating, there are no ticket sales made available, so we're not rating for dispensers or for anything that would relate to those items. Let's move on. Well, here we've arrived at the main staircase in the center of the A wing that takes us from the first level of the college to the second level. We're going to use this location to talk about a lot of the things that we would look at when we're rating a set of stairs. First of all, you'll notice that there is a little bit of color on the nosings, but it does not wrap around the nosings, so it's not visual when you're both descending and ascending. We're also going to be rating for handrails. We're going to look at the measurements of the handrails as well as the design. We're looking at the color of the flooring and what's being used. The illumination in here is quite good. And we'll take a riser height and a tread depth. We also would normally, if it was a round handrail, take the diameter. But again, because they're not what we would expect to find on site up to code, we will measure for the height of what's here. And it's not continuous as we go up. There is a break at the wall, so we need to note that in our ratings. When we're measuring for tread height and also for tread depth. We're paying attention to the nosings. We want color to come around the top so it can be seen both ascending and descending, which, as you can see, there's a slip-resistant strip here that's been added, which is a good feature, but it's not going to give us the visual contrast that we'd like to see. Let's take a few measurements. So we have a closed stair tread, which is a good thing. And when we take our tread depth, we're measuring from here to the edge. And then we have our height, checking to see that they stay consistent all the way up. Next, when we take our handrail, going from height to handrail and following up the stairs. And also looking at the clear width of the stairs. Make sure there's ample room for people who are traveling, both up and down. There's a lot of other things to observe as you're in the stairrail. Take a minute and have a look, and let us know what you think. Then we'll head upstairs. Well, here we are in our library at NSCC. This space is normally a location for lots of gathering points with students and activity for studying and learning. Today it's very quiet. We also have a lot of furniture moved out of place, so it's not really a full representation of what it would look like on a given day, but let's have a look at what we can see. You'll notice first off that there are multiple options here for desks with seating. We have some chairs that are rolling. We have some fixed chairs. We also have behind us couches with armrests and without, and we have a good variety of options in place. When it's being used, of course, we would be measuring for clear path of travel. That simply means taking our tape, setting it at the width we'd like to see, and visually walking throughout the space, making sure that all areas are giving you the clear movement you need to have. We would measure for the height of every desk and the knee clearance as well. We would also measure chairs. We would look at outlets and light switches and anything else that would be relevant to our rating here. Be sure to use your professional handbook and rate this space accordingly. Let's head on. we find ourselves at the end of the A-wing hallway, and there's a few things we're going to rate in this area. We're going to start with the water fountain. The water fountain is always something that is rated if they are on site. And if we have more than one, which in this school we certainly do, we would look at all of them and take a combination of the measurements and make sure that that is the rating we assign to it with the average. The first thing, of course, we want to make sure it's not projected into the path of travel. They've done a nice job of building this into the wall and making sure that it's not a hazard as people are traveling along the path of travel. We want to have a few measurements. We want to first make sure that we get the measurement for our height, also the measurement for the knee clearance at the bottom, and then making sure that the controls are easy to use. Moving on, we're going to look at signage as well as doors. Now, when we're looking at our doorways, we're looking at a lot of things that are simple and easy to measure. If we start with our signage focus, we're looking at height, just like we have with the others. We're looking at the background, the color contrast, whether there's braille and raised lettering, which there is, and that if you look down the hall, you'll notice it's consistent. Throughout the building, their signage is very consistent and easy to locate on the latch side of the door. Next, when we move to our doors, we're noticing that we have good handles. We also have a nice clear width that we measure for. And we would normally check the weight of the door, but we know from usage of these doors, they're set very well and they don't weigh a lot to use. We rate the panel here, and we also look at the color contrast. Got a nice dark color on a blue door with the nice white background, and it works well. Let's move on. So at the end of our A-wing on the second floor, there's a few things we're going to stop and talk about. First, we're going to examine the evacuation plan. The evacuation plan we find here has a matte surface. It's supposed to create non-glare, but you'll notice there still is a bit of glare and it should be rated accordingly. It's probably because of the curved feature of the sign. But there's a lot of things we look for on an evacuation plan. We're looking at font size, we're looking at the color contrasting. We want to see that there is a route clearly marked with alternative exits, but we're also hoping to find tactile and braille, which does not exist on this sign. You might have already guessed, but that sign's looking pretty high. We will take a measurement and make that available to you, but be sure to rate that accordingly. The signs throughout the school building are bound in a similar rating height. We also can take a step back. We can now look at a fire pole. Fire poles and fire extinguishers are often found quite close to each other. And when we're measuring them, we're always measuring to the pole or to the access point for both things. We want to make sure that nothing is protruding more than 100 millimeters out from the wall, and we're going to measure a fire pole and see how high it is. We're always measuring to where the handle of activation is, measuring carefully to make sure we get a good reading, and measuring all of them on site. Okay, let's have a look at our area of refuge. Here you'll find our area of refuge. Again, second level, going down the stairs. An area of refuge needs to be clearly marked with proper signage that's visible from a distance. We also see our green running man here, which also gives a good indication of where to escape in case of fire. We're looking at color contrast of doors and also the ability to push through and get into here. Let's go have a look. Well, here we find ourselves in our area of refuge. You'll notice it's a well-marked sign on the wall, and we also have emergency lighting provided overhead. We know from talking to facilities that these are fire doors and that this is a secondary or a separate air source, air supply in this area, so that if there was smoke in the hallways, a person would be safe to wait in this area. Please be sure to use your professional handbook and look for all the things we're rating in these features. We know we need to have a look at our measurements. So let's find out how much space we have to work with. Out to the end here, and coming across. But something to notice is that even though we have good distance We need to measure again over here because the door could be in the way of opening and block some of the area we expect to use. So taking a more conservative measurement for this side. One more thing we should point out in this area, because we didn't do it in our interior main set of stairs, when rating the stairs for the NSCC campus, it's important to note that the stairs do not have a tactile attention indicator at the top of any of them. That's something we expect to find and really need to find at all sets of stairways. So again, on this campus, and certainly with the ones we're rating, there are no tactile attention indicators present. That gives the indication to someone who has low vision or someone who is blind approaching a set of stairs that they were right in front of them. That wraps up our area of refuge. Let's head down those stairs. Well, that wraps up our time here at the NSCC campus. I hope that you've enjoyed going through COVID style. Please keep in mind that despite the fact that there were signs and warnings, we've done everything to comply with what we were asked. We had permission to access everything that we saw today. And I hope that you will reach out to me. You're going to have questions. There are so many things that couldn't be covered in one video. As you go through your project and you start entering features, we will be providing you with the necessary measurements that aren't observable from video. We will be giving you the information for site details, and certainly as questions arise, we will be discussing lots of them together. Thank you for learning with us, and I hope that you've enjoyed this time together.